everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Winging It Formula E podcast with myself, Nigel Chu, and Freddie Coates, number one and number two of the trio of Winging It colleagues. You could argue, you can make your mind which way around. We, of course, have had the Diryah E-Prixs 2 races on Friday and Saturday a few days ago. Freddie, what did you make of it? It seemed much more exciting than the season opener in Mexico 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it seemed like Formula E properly, even though Mexico did also seem like Formula E. This was, it was the form we've come to know and love of Formula E over the past 4 or 5 years of racing and energy efficiency all coming together to form very interesting, very narrative-driven races. And I really enjoyed both of them and was very interested to see the similarities between them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because often in previous seasons, you can get the one race on the Saturday or Friday in this case, and then the next day you get a completely different order. But instead, you got Pascal Wehrlein winning both races, Jake Dennis second in both races, very close to each other at the end. I mean, just brilliant performances again from both of them. They were, of course, 1-2 in Mexico as well. Dennis ahead of Wehrlein. Back then, I mean, why do you think, apart from efficiency, why do you think they are at the front and the drivers to beat?
Well, it's not just efficiency; it is the capability from their sides of the garage to enact that efficiency. I think it is very intelligent racing styles from Dennis and Wehrlein. Because you look at Lotterer and Da Costa, and in both races, in Diryah, they couldn't replicate that level of efficiency. And albeit Da Costa was hamstrung in the first race after getting caught up in a bit of a melee at the first corner, but in direct comparisons, Wehrlein and Dennis in all 3 races this year completely outshone their teammates in the way they managing their drives. So I think actually, we've all been going into this going, look at how efficient the Porsche is, but I'm coming out of this going, look at how efficient the Porsche is, but also look at how efficient it is when you apply it correctly and when you get your head down and understand Formula E properly. And I think Pascal Wehrlein and Jake Dennis are head and shoulders above the rest in the way they've done that this weekend. Actually, I'd throw Sam Bird in there as well, but for particularly the second race, he was able to manage that car very, very well on energy.
Yeah, they got the attack. I mean, just quickly on that, on Sam Bird, whilst I've got it in my head because I will forget later. They got the attack mode strategy completely wrong for me by trying to do 2 in the final 10 minutes or so. That cost them a bit for me. But yeah, that's just a bad thing. But yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think Da Costa, it would have been interesting in the first race if he didn't go up the back of, who was it again? Who did he hit the back of? I can't remember.
He hit the back of Degrassi.
There we go. Yeah, because I think he started ahead of Dennis in that race, so he maybe would have came through. It could have even been Porsche 1-2 perhaps in that race if Da Costa had similar energy management. But then, the second race, he was nowhere near as strong as Wehrlein, his teammate, and didn't come through the field at all. So those 2 drivers seem to have adapted and understood the new car much better than the teammates.
And to be honest, it's not surprising when you look at their Gen 2 careers. Wehrlein had no testing or no experience of Formula E when he came into the second race of season 5 and was fighting for pole straight away. And in the next couple of races and nearly won in his 3rd or 4th race. And Dennis plugged away and then soared through for a championship fight. So in his first season. So these guys are workers and grinders and understanders of Formula E. To be fair, you can make cases that it was on the cards for this kind of development as for them as drivers.
And I also think there's a small element that Lotterer has moved to Andretti. I mean, yes, it's still Porsche powertrain, so changed teams completely from what Tito is now to Porsche. So I think we see it in Formula One as well when new driver changes. There's a small element of that, perhaps.
Definitely in that regard. But Lotterer would have been driving the Porsche car as much as Wehrlein and Dennis would. I think Da Costa's the one that you can make that argument for, because he's come from DS, but Lotterer was with Porsche and is now still in a Porsche car. So his systems are still the same. It's the team, the way the team operates is different, of course. But from what Oliver Askew was saying on the coverage, is that the way the team was running in the race was entirely different to what they were doing when he was driving there last, 5 or 6 months ago. So these stuff develops anyway. And I don't know. I just would have expected a driver. I rate as much as Lotterer adaptability and Da Costa to have been at the heels of these guys at least. But who knows? Maybe I'm jumping to too negative conclusion too quickly.
Yeah, who knows? Do you think there was any way Dennis could have won either of the races, or not really?
I think he shouldn't have got bogged down at the start of the second race. I think where Wehrlein won it against Dennis was the fact that he was able to make hay early on in the race and be in a position where he was still conserving energy and going up the order, whereas Dennis was propped up a bit behind Buemi. We will talk about, because he's been doing very nicely. But Dennis, if he hadn't been stuck in P7, having lost a position at the start, I reckon he could have been up there. But I reckon that their pace was very similar throughout. So I do think, if he could have had a more continued charge throughout the race if he had made a move earlier in the race in terms of attacking those ahead in the way that Wehrlein did, because they let Wehrlein get away, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In the first race, I don't really know, to be honest. In the first race, I think they were surprised by how much they were able to go through the field. I think they should have learned from that for the second race a bit more.
Yeah, the track position was the only thing that kind of separated them for me. I think you're right. I don't think there was enough pace difference for Dennis to get past Wehrlein. So simply being behind that lap one was the difference. And I also think, I don't know who thoughts about it, but to me, through that on the long right hander before the back straight, the minimum speed of Andretti and Porsche was quite noticeable to me, that they were carrying more speed through the corner, which then you save energy because of that, because you don't have to bring your speed down as much, I guess. The Maserati or DS cars, they to me had a bit of understeer. I mean, obviously we're talking small margins, but it does seem the chassis, as well as the powertrain of the Porsche, is doing a lot of good stuff.
Well, in a spec chassis series, if you can dial it in the correct way and so on, then that's very impressive, and it speaks to a more competitive season than what the results of the first three races point to. But if Porsche and Andretti with Wehrlein and Dennis have got a march and on the nose setup very nicely, then good for them, because it's working very well. It's, like you say, allowing them to carry more speed. I think we could see it very, very visibly with Hughes in qualifying for the second race, particularly. That car was just doing everything he told it to do, and he could correct it but carry the speed and so on. And I think with a little bit of understeer, but that kind of understeer where you can hug the wall, they were able to succeed very nicely with car pace. It's just, I think the Porsche cars were able to do that in the race a bit more.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, do you think we need? We talked about this off the podcast. Do you think we need a kind of rivalry between Dennis and Wehrlein, because they are 31 points ahead already, which is absolutely remarkable. I don't think anyone thought this. We all thought we'd have a multi-team fight, but we haven't had a proper rivalry since. Well, the only rivalry has been the Grassi versus Buemi in seasons 1, 2, and 3. So do you think we can they need that?
I don't know if it's needed, but I think it's cool.
Yeah,
I think it's very cool to have. I remember with, and it's not a comparison to make, but with the first 5 or 6 races of 2021 in Formula One, there were only 2 drivers in first and second in all of them, and it just points to, oh my god, we're getting a fight. And if that kind of thing happens here, at least with them all close to each other, it does make it really. It just builds into a fight itself. I do think Dennis and Wehrlein are two of the loveliest guys. So it's not quite the sort of the fight that you could get from a Buemi and Degrassi, which is where they've got so much steel about them as drivers. On their shoulders, on their face, on that they wear on their sleeves, that they can throw at each other. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops. And I think, I think Formula E, we criticize their marketing quite a lot. If you were to hand them something like this that they can put on a plate in Stoke, they probably wouldn't do it well enough. But I think it's the best thing for it, definitely.
Yeah, I think the personalities wouldn't quite work as well as the Buemi, but nevertheless, if you're gonna get two top drivers that are much better than everyone else, then yeah, I mean, a rivalry is only a good thing for or motorsport, I think. So yeah, we'll see how if they can continue the dominance as it is in Hyderabad in India in 2 weeks. But let's talk about the other drivers. Sebastien Buemi is up to third in the championship after got pole from nowhere in the first race, and then he also got fourth and sixth in the 2 races as well. I mean, that was completely unexpected, really, wasn't it? But we've been talking about how poor he's been the last few years, and then to get pole was incredible.
Yeah, I think realistically we can probably point to more how poor the Nissan was. To be honest, it's probably giving Buemi a bit of a break for the past couple of years now, and he's got in a car that's reacting well with him, and he's doing well. 3 duels performances, one pole position, and like you say, third in the championship, albeit double his points, and he's only on then the same points as Jake Dennis. But he's for every Formula E season, starting if your results are 6th, 4th, and 6th with a pole position, then that's normally very, very good. So
yeah.
he's doing well, and it's good to see Envision doing well, and one of Formula E's favourite sons doing well as a driver, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think? I mean, what do you think it is? Just the car suited him more, the team suited him more? What
I don't know.
What would you kind of put it down as well?
I don't really know. It's hard to say about the team suiting him more because he was in the same team that won him titles and lots of races.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sure because there were obviously changes in that team as a result of Jean-Paul Driot's passing and so on 4 or 5 years ago, the dams side of it. And now it is just Nissan. There's no dams involved at all. So I'm not sure really. Buemi's an interesting soul. I think, to be honest, I do think for a lot of drivers, a refresh and a reset can just work wonders.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think, to be honest, that probably is paying dividends. I mean, he's completely outperformed Casti from the off, and Casti's not a slouch. Yeah. So,
I mean, I think we see every racing driver has 1 or 2 bad years at least in their career. Maybe for Buemi, along with the Nissan not being amazing, that kind of he didn't quite have the same motivation, maybe, and I think reset does kind of help in that respect. So yeah, that is possibly why. Yeah. The McLarens.
It's interesting because Buemi sort of ended up being the lead Jaguar driver, despite Bird having the headline results. So, and Bird and Buemi are the 2 drivers we came into this season. So I think 2 of the drivers we sort of thought needed to have a year to shine, and they've started that well.
Yeah, I mean, Bird's been speaking about how immediately the Gen 3 car suits him more than the Gen 2. I think he's talked about in the braking phase, especially. That's where he's been much better. And yeah, he seems to have had the slide drive in terms of race pace anyway, because in the second race, he had like 2 or 3% more than Evans at the halfway point of the race, and that's why he finished ahead of him, and Evans batted Hughes and ran into the back of him at the finish line, which was a very weird incident.
He hooked onto him. He hooked onto his tail light. Otherwise, he would have got past him, Evans. But he just Hughes stopped that bit too early, and Evans turned that bit too late, which meant he just hooked onto him. But yeah, the Evans Bird comparison was interesting because Bird started 9th and was fighting for the podium in that race, and Evans started obviously on the front row and just fell back. So it was interesting to see that eventually it became a kind of no-brainer for Bird to be past Evans and fighting ahead of him. And we've not seen that in that team since realistically season 7. So, and that was only a couple of times in season 7. In that year, Mitch was still the stronger Jaguar driver. So it'd be interesting to see, because I do think the as I was saying with Da Costa and Lotterer, there are elements that they can take from the other side of the garage to unlock. So I think Evans is the kind of driver who would have a good relationship with Sam Bird to figure that out. But it was a surprise to see a driver I think we all rate so highly in that kind of position.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the learning curve, I think all the drivers have talked about is just so high. It is about who's going to learn and understand the most, I think, because, and in fact, I think that's one reason why Porsche suddenly went from, because they were telling me in Valencia, they were like field testing, and then they suddenly got to the front. And it just must be over that 4 or 5 week period between Mexico, first race, and pre-season testing. They must have just found something, whether to regen or the power trade itself. I'm not sure, but the development rate is just absolutely huge from the teams themselves and the drivers. Learning and fine tuning the setup and that kind of thing. This is I think. Well, I was going to say the back will change, but it does seem Porsche still have a big margin. But anyway, McLaren, they need to. So I started waffling. And McLaren, they need to find some efficient to challenge. But their 1 lap pace is excellent, and Jake Hughes still delivering absolutely sensational stuff from him.
Yes. Sorry, I thought the question was going to be longer. Jake Hughes still delivering fantastically in qualifying, but Rast performing as well with him now, and performing better in the races. Actually, both these races, Rast was better on efficiency and better on just intellectual racecraft, which is what you'd expect from a driver who's 10 years older, and has raced in Formula E before as a teammate of Lucas Di Grassi. So I think there's definitely room from both drivers to sort of pull this performance out, and I think Rast has improved, and Hughes, different Jake. Hughes has definitely got one weak side of the day ticked. He needs to just copy Rene a bit more in the race, and I think he was doing that a bit better in the second race, because obviously he had a higher position, but it'll be interesting to see, because that is the only chink in his armor at the moment, and they are working well with that Nissan car, better than Nissan, obviously.
I find that strange.
Well, I find it strange how much they're better than Nissan, because at least with Envision and Jaguar, they're dicing. With Porsche and Andretti, they're dicing as well. But with Nissan, they're off the back. But with occasional cameos from Fenestraz in the timing sheets, because which has been a pleasant surprise. But Hughes and Rast just seem to be able just to work that, and the McLaren team just to work that really nicely. So hopefully they can unlock a bit of efficiency with that and can move on forward. And can not move on forward, can stay at the front of a race, because when you just after sort of you get to a third distance or a quarter distance and those first energy figures flash up and you think, oh, okay, yeah, they're falling back. So unless they can get to a track where overtaking is much harder, much harder.
Which I don't think there are any.
Hyderabad and Cape Town coming up, I'm pretty sure, are quite fast energy usage tracks. So it'll be interesting to see. But I don't think anytime soon. I think it might be somewhere like London only, where they can kind of,
which is the last round.
Exactly, it's a long way away. So you're right. They need to find an element of efficiency, don't they?
Yeah, the thing for me, if you don't have efficiency, you are a sitting duck. Like, there is nothing you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they did quite well to get the positions they did. But there's something why the better. For me, it's an element of the drivers' quality being a bit better. Do you think that's fair to say compared to Fenestraz and Nato, and then you got Hughes and Rast at McLaren? Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays into it. But Nato has Formula E experience and has good Formula E experience. Fenestraz isn't a bad driver, in my opinion. I think he's a good driver, and I think it's just a case of learning. But because Hughes has learned so quickly, that doesn't necessarily help. But I do think there's an element of the way the team are running it as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they got the same personnel as the Mercedes winning championship.
Yeah, exactly.
Season, so yeah,
exactly.
That's probably those two factors combined, which is helping McLaren to be towards the front. But Maserati still struggling a bit compared to what they kind of expected. I mean, just kind of average in terms of efficiency, one lap pace in the corners. That's how I kind of see it.
Yeah, I don't really know how to sort of go about telling them what to do. It's the kind of thing, if one can do it, the other should be able to do it. And it's a case of how much information are they sharing and how much information are they willing to share, and what's competitive and what's not. And I think it does go back to sort of setting up the car as well, because the gaps shouldn't be as big as they are if they're all getting to the right setup and right drivability with the car. But clearly you could see it clearly with the cars that were qualifying well. At least they were responsive to the drivers, whereas you look at someone like the Maserati team, they're having to fight that car because they're not getting a good handle on how to use the car. It could be a really fast car, but they're just not quite figuring it out, and that just means that they're then fighting it and they're using more energy just by having to do corrections and things like that. So it adds up.
Yeah, and maybe Mortara and Gunter both had those crashes in for the Friday qualifying as well.
Yeah,
it was a massive dent for them. Do you think it's too early to say they're out of the championship, those teams, Maserati and the DS teams? I mean, obviously the quality of drivers they've got is great, so they can come back if they find something. But do you think they've got a bit too much to find?
Stoffel van Dorn's on 1 point, and Pascal Wehrlein is 3 points off where he finished last year. So I don't like to discount these guys, and also because it's Formula E, you can't discount people. So
it does feel different this year, doesn't it? Because the field's not as kind of close, and that it just feel like they've got such a big margin to find Maserati.
Didn't Verne score no points in the first 2 races of his second title season and things like that? Like,
yeah, but that was with the old qualifying format, wasn't it?
It was with the old qualifying format. That's true, but it does kind of imply that. And Evans last year was in the title fight for a long time, but he didn't do anything in the first 3 races. So, I think it's too early to discount, because we're at a stage definitely where someone can find something overnight. And I do think you look at Bird and Jaguar, and they found something for Saudi Arabia. So yeah, I think there's still elements that Stellantis cars, Maserati and DS can find something for Hyderabad or Cape Town, and then can just lock out at the top and do something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're not on a charge.
It's got to happen in the next 2 races, though, surely. I mean, if they're still where they are after India and Cape Town, I can definitely rule them out, I'd say. But I mean, for me, it's already looking like too much, just because of the performance on the track as well. It doesn't look very optimistic, I'd say, there, which is a big concern for me. Like the actual performance, especially from testing as well. When there's so much expectation. So yeah. Any other drivers or incidents or thoughts before wrapping up this episode, Freddie?
More just sort of I'm vaguely impressed with Kelvin van der Linde.
Yeah,
I do think the
replacing
Abt
Robin
Mahindra
Franz.
car is not working well at all, and he was ahead of Nico Müller for most of the weekend. So that's very impressive. And hopefully they can figure out how to run that car a bit better as the season goes on.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe he'll get more chances to shine. But I thought he did it on a stand-in role where he hadn't driven a Gen 3 car until this really complicated track. I thought, that did impress me, and he applied himself very well.
Yeah. And so for racing, this is the last topic, the racing, do you think it's better than Gen 2 in terms of, I don't know, it feels a bit more pure to me in terms of the actual overtakes, because the attack mode is not making a big difference. In fact, I'd say, I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage choice, I'd say it's kind of neutral in terms of the time loss and then the minute or 2 minutes off. It's when you use it, you don't actually gain that much kind of back from where you were. So there was kind of more pure, we're seeing less overtakes, we're seeing more pure overtakes, if that makes sense.
Yes, but the overtakes are being set up corners before and so on, and the overtakes have to be driven. And I think it's a detriment to the attack mode for what it has been, granted, to be honest. But I think that's forced a bit more of a quite a junior formula style of setting up the corners, quite a pure way of racing, to be honest. And it's been quite fun to see. Actually, you've had some moments like, I think Bird in the sort of final corner did an absolute send on was it Rast, I think, or maybe I think it was Rast, or might have been Hughes. But when Wehrlein was getting away, he just thought, right, I've got to send it as well now, and just went for it. And you've got that kind of element of racing, which has always been in Formula E, but it is definitely still there, and it definitely will be there at tracks with a lot more kind of flow, where you've really got to hunt down the car in front, and the kind of racing you get in national series, which is why people love sort of a touring car race and things like that, the way you can see an overtake being built up and built up and built up and then attacked. I think you could see that quite well, particularly at this track, because you had the first and second sector of just the kinky bobsleigh run that they have. And yeah, it was nice to see. But one question to you, Nigel: what do you think is going to happen in India?
Well, I said after Mexico, the pecking order would be different. And apart from the Mahindra dropping, it's not really been the case. Well, and Jaguar came up as well. So I think the pecking order will be different. I'll say that.
I think it will be different. Yeah. I just can't see.
Will Porsche really dominate the season? Is what after the next race,
if they do,
if they're 1 and 2 again, then it's a Wehrlein. Then we're gonna have to seriously start considering it, which is amazing for Formula E.
It's amazing that we're saying it's amazing to have a dominance in that way, and Formula E has done that very well with the customer packages and so on. Which is a wider topic for other stuff, but yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see, and a bit of me just kind of want a Dennis Wehrlein 1-2 again.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I will. I do think. I mean, it's a new track, so that will neutralise things as well. I think, like I said before, about the teams learning of every single mile that they do. So, I do think it'll be different. I'm not sure which teams will be at the front, but I don't think we'll see the same dominance from the Porsche-powered teams. That's for sure. That will be my kind of take from it. But
sounds good.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, after a bit of a plum first race, these second and third races are much better, which is good to see.
I said at the start, narrative races, they seem to tell a story, which was very cool.
Yeah, because there was a lot of negativity coming into the season, but I think in general, from what I've seen as well on social media, it's definitely a lot, more positive now and that kind of thing. And there's not a lot of negative comments, which is good to see. So yeah, I think that wraps up everything. Sorry if my internet has been a bit dodgy. I've noticed over this podcast to the listeners and viewers. Nothing new there. Me and Freddie will be back with Adam for a Formula One podcast, probably about the car launches, Hassan, Red Bull, and if the FIA and F1 continue to say stuff about each other or anything else that happens over this week. So hope you have a good week, and we will see you then.
Goodbye.